Welcome to this session, Turning Rhetoric into Reality, Empowering Philanthropy as Catalytic Partners for Systems Change, co-hosted by the Partnering Initiative and WINGS. We're delighted to have you here. As we go through the session today, there'll be discussion, there'll be some insights based on research that we've done, and there will be an opportunity for Q&A. In the meantime, as we do this, please feel free to share comments or questions. We will try and monitor them and keep track as they come in. The meeting is being recorded today, so we will be sharing this as a follow-up in case you have any questions. And I believe we'll also be sharing we can share the PowerPoint if useful. Is that correct, Lena?
Yes.
Perfect. I'm going to be your MC for today. I'm Sameera Mehra. I'm the Collective Intelligence and Advocacy Director at WINGS. And to start us off today, I'm going to invite Benjamin Belagy and Darren Stippy to really introduce WINGS and the Partnering Initiative, or TPI, to talk about our collaboration and what brings us here together. So I am going to welcome Benjamin and Darian. But before that, just as you saw the agenda, we have opening remarks, we have a presentation of survey findings, we'll have a discussion, some first reactions and responses to the findings that have been shared, and then of course time for Q&A and closing remarks. So Benjamin, I'd like to welcome you to start us off.
Great. Thank you so much, Sameera, and thank you all for joining. It's wonderful to see such a diverse group from all parts of the world gathering to have an important conversation on the need for the philanthropic sector to partner both within the field, but also with other stakeholders, with other actors. And well, I'm as Sameera said, I lead an organization called WINGS. I think a lot of you are familiar with. A lot of our members are on this call. But for those of you who aren't, we are the main global philanthropic network that gathers about 230 organizations who build the field, who help the sector to become more impactful, more transformative in society, and also raise its voice on the global stage. And the community that we represent reaches out to and serves and represents about 100,000 foundations worldwide. So we have a great potential together collectively to bring about change in the way philanthropy work, in the way we try to bring about change in society. And one of the key shifts that we see is needed for our field to have a more transformative impact in today's current world, which, as you all know, is a world of uncertainty, a world of disruption, which really calls on our field to be more resilient, to be more adaptive, to be more networked, so that we can respond in an ongoing way to how the global and local situations unfold and evolve. And one of the key ideas is that there's no single strategy, there's no smart approach of a single organization. May that be a very big foundation, for example, that will be about to bring about systemic change in the current context, because everything is interconnected, local, global. The issues are overlapping now, and the complexity is so high that the best approach we can take is to work collectively. And for that, we need a few things. Well, we need a mindset shift. It's a matter of decentering a little bit our organizations from the work and seeing ourselves as enablers, seeing ourselves as being at the service of a change that is greater than us. So we'll talk about that, but it also takes some very concrete things, like a support system or an infrastructure that helps create these, build these bridges and generate these collaborations in an ongoing way, so that we can accelerate the pace at which we evolve in our way of working and collaborate. Because right now we see a lot of really great efforts happening around the world, lots of new joint funds and innovations around blended finance, and a lot of very diverse efforts. And I think we'll hear some great examples today. But it's too slow. Like, we really need to accelerate that change, and that takes an infrastructure. So we need to create coordination mechanisms on the ground. We need to create networks. We need to build bridges between the existing networks, and so on and so forth. So that's something that is really front of mind for us at WINGS as we help build the ecosystem for philanthropy. And on the specific topic of multi-stakeholder partnerships, which is really quite critical. We're also starting to do some participatory research with our members, looking at the state of the art, the existing ecosystem to support multi-actor partnerships. Especially right now, we're starting a research with our members, Latimpacto in Latin America, ADPA in Africa, and SADVA in Asia, trying to understand what are the existing collaboration mechanisms, what is the existing infrastructure for partnerships to scale up and scale out. And we'll share these reports next year. But for now, we're really excited to have this discussion, to launch this survey that was done in partnership with TPI, who is also a principal champion of the transformation agenda we're promoting collectively, specifically around this collaboration imperative for the sector. So really looking forward to hearing the outcomes and the highlight from Darian in a few minutes. But just wanted to acknowledge that great partnership and the involvement of so many members in this research. So looking forward to a great, exciting conversation. And with this, I'll hand it over to you again for the presentation of the survey. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Benjamin. And Darren, over to you. It'd be great to hear more about the partnering initiative, the role of a principal champion, and of course, the work that you've been doing on partnerships for quite a while now.
Thanks so much, Sameera, and thank you so much, Benjamin. It's such a pleasure to be here today. They're seeing so many familiar faces, and it's such a popular webinar because this topic around collaboration, how we bring all the societal sectors together to bring their different resources, the different levers, the public, the private, the people resources that together can shift systems. This topic is absolutely essential in every area of international development, where right now I'm sitting in the OECD, where they are developing their latest strategy. They have a consultation with about 50 different philanthropy organizations and foundations. And the big question is around public-private philanthropy partnerships. How can philanthropy unlock private capital and private investment, and also find the innovation to be able to find new ways of delivering public services more efficiently and effectively? And the Partnering Initiative has been working for the last 22 years, really look at exactly these issues, is how do we scale up the use of these multi-stakeholder collaborations to really drive change. And so we've been delighted to be working with WINGS as the champion for the Principle 4 of the Transforming or the Philanthropy Transformation Initiative, which is really about how do we build our understanding and awareness of the need for multi-stakeholder collaboration, but then moving forward is how do we really drive philanthropy to be able to become this really more and more essential actor with the skills, with the capabilities, supporting partnerships in the right way. And we heard from Benjamin already about the platforms for collaboration. And that's really what has set this whole program of research up. The reason we were doing this needs assessment is because we've worked with so many foundations all wanting the same thing, to be real forceful agents of change through collaboration. But they're finding it challenging. And this needs assessment that you'll shortly see was all about finding out why, in order to then develop a program, collective program to really drive forward this whole area of work. So a huge welcome from myself and the team at the Partnering Initiative. I look forward to great discussions.
Thanks, Darren. And before we go into the findings right now, we'd love to know who is in the room with us today. And so we thought we'd do a bit of a Zoom poll besides the introductions that everyone has been sharing on the chat. So Natalia, my colleague, is going to be putting up a Zoom poll, and we're going to ask a couple of easy questions. First of all, what entity are you representing today? Is it a foundation? Is it a philanthropy support organization? And for those who may not be familiar, philanthropy support organizations are infrastructure backbone organizations that take on multiple roles: research institutions, think tanks, donor advised funds, giving movements, giving platforms, advisory foundations, advisory entities, networks, associations, and much, much more. And of course, you could be representing other stakeholders, such as civil society. Maybe we even have some government stakeholders here. Who knows? So yeah, really good to get an idea of who's in the room with us today. Then we have other questions. What's your current knowledge or level of multi-stakeholder partnerships? You could be new to the concept, basic understanding, maybe some practical experience, or an advanced practitioner. It's great to know who is joining this discussion and great to have a spectrum of expertise in the room. And then what's your current knowledge level on systems change? So we're at about 85% who've participated in the polls. I think everyone should be able to see this. In terms of who we have in the room, we have about 42% that are philanthropy support organizations, 22% that represent foundations, and 36 other. In terms of current knowledge level, a large percentage has some practical experience and with some advanced practitioner and basic understanding, which is also great to see that there are examples of how this is happening already amongst all of us, and would love to leverage on that. And then current knowledge level is there's a bulk of practical and basic, and then on sides, advanced and new to the concept. So hopefully the insights that we're sharing today should help answer or add insights across all levels, and then we can talk about what more we could be doing together. And I'd like to invite Lina from TPI now to share more about the purpose of the research, and then some of the insights from the research, as there are many, but we've picked a few. So Lina, over to you.
Thank you so much, Sameera. I'm starting to share my screen now. Hopefully you should be able to see it. So today's presentation has two parts. First of all, we'll look into a research report on PPPs. And secondly, we'll hear about how do we actually make it happen? So that's a philanthropy needs assessment that my colleagues have already spoken about. To start off, let's look into what is the opportunity. And what do we mean by opportunity? It's the potential for many foundations to work differently and move beyond the traditional grant making to driving transformational partnerships that create lasting change. And one model of such transformational partnerships are PPPs. So last year, we did a research report exploring that. Some of you might have already seen and read this report, but I'll do a quick run through for those who haven't. So just to make sure that we're on the same page, here's the definition of PPPs. So it is a long-term multi-stakeholder collaboration in which public, private, people, and philanthropy sectors align and combine their unique resources and powerful levers to tackle the root causes and together deliver social, economic, and environmental transformation. So I appreciate it's quite a long and complicated definition, but what we're really talking about here is systems change. And it happens as we bring different sectors of a society together and use the levers of public and private sectors. So to be more specific, private sector is the one that brings together technical innovation and operational efficiency. But what it's really about is the business' unique ability to create scalable market-based solutions to societal challenges. On the other hand, we have public sector that provides the regulatory frameworks, access to public services, and the ability to institutionalize successful models, and as a result, significantly increase the scale of these transformations. People were not part of our definition initially, but communities and civil society were seen in pretty much every example of PPPs that we saw in our research, and they're crucial to deliver these transformations. And then finally, philanthropy is important for different reasons, and we'll talk about that in detail later. But first of all, let's look at what PPPs can achieve. So in our research, we analyzed 46 examples of PPPs, and we saw that there are changes in systems in a whole variety of topics. So we have seen examples that bring about just energy transition. So it starts with unlocking investment in infrastructure for example, through blended finance for net zero energy production. So energy is produced by the private sector companies, while public sector provides access and regulation. But it's also important to ensure that these transitions are just, so we need to protect people's livelihoods. And this aspect on justice is often due to philanthropy because it focuses more on the social impact. We saw many other examples, and I'll just mention them briefly for the sake of time. So we saw enhanced social services such as education and healthcare. We saw how supply chains become more resilient, sustainable, and equitable. We saw expanded access to vital services such as water or internet, as well as provision of job opportunities. And finally, we saw that partnerships provide demonstration of pro-development business models that can be scaled up. So this is how the systems are changing. But now let's look at the part we've not talked about yet, and that's the role of philanthropy. So for systems change to start, it's often difficult to overcome the initial barriers that partnerships encounter, such as the ones you see on the right-hand side, for example, financial or political risk. And what we've seen is that philanthropy plays a unique role in what we call systems change activation. So it provides that critical activation energy to initiate and sustain transformative partnerships. And it's similar to an activation energy needed for a chemical process to start. So what it does, it helps overcome initial barriers and build momentum for change. And I previously mentioned an example of just energy transition. So if we think about why that's not happening in many parts of the world, and you think about the barriers on the right, it's most of these, to be honest, including financial and political risk, but also inertia and sort of business as usual of using fossil fuels as a main source of energy. So unless you have this activation energy, the change wouldn't start. So to be more specific on the role of philanthropy, we found evidence on 6 key catalytic roles that philanthropy plays. And I'll tell you up front that it's beyond just providing funding. So first of all, philanthropy is key in initiating and convening the partners. So taking them through a partnership development process and potentially coordinating the partnership's activities. The second role we saw is co-creating and co-designing PPPs with public and private partners, and in some cases also other foundations. So especially in larger programs, it wouldn't be just one foundation sort of representing philanthropy. It was often several foundations coming together. We also saw that philanthropy provides initial and catalytic funding of a PPP setup and running costs, not so much because of the implementation, as that mostly is covered by public and private partners. Philanthropy also provides capacity building of partners to be able to play their roles in the PPP and accelerating process with technical assistance. Another key role is de-risking a PPP for partner investors through innovative finance. And finally, it's about enabling PPPs to be able to innovate, test, and learn through multiple iterations of a solution. So this is where philanthropy is in a better position because this government is often risk-averse. And while business is definitely much more open to innovation, but they also want to see quick results. So what we see is philanthropy is more patient to allow for these multiple iterations of a solution that eventually arrive more towards the systems change and transformation. So sometimes it's just one or two of these roles from the list, but we have also seen partnerships where philanthropy plays all 6 key roles. So it is a key partner in systems change. This is just a very brief summary that I provided now, but our research report is available online, and we also have a library of PPPs with 46 examples. So my colleagues will share the links in the chat if they haven't already. But now let's move to a part that we're all excited about, which is how do we actually make it happen? So that's the philanthropy needs assessment, the survey that was mentioned before. So also just to mention that in this part, we're not only focusing on PPPs, but also other type of multi-stakeholder partnerships. So that may be philanthropy and private sector, philanthropy and multinationals, and so on. So the needs assessment and why we even did that is because we saw a growing interest in partnerships for systems change and a lot of rhetoric around it. So a lot of conferences and webinars and so on. But we saw that there was a gap between the enthusiasm and implementation. So we focused on understanding the current state and barriers to partnerships for systems change. So what we did was an online survey that was completed by 55 foundations working across diverse regions and focus areas. So let's look at the results. So we asked participants to what extent do they currently engage in partnerships with systems actors such as public, private sectors, communities, or investors to deliver systems change. And what you see is quite positive. There's a lot of green. So 56% currently engage in partnerships for systems change to a great extent, or that's their entire focus. And if we look at foundations' future aspirations, we see how this graph shifts more towards the right. So there's more green. And in this case, 84% of respondents say that partnerships will be very important or essential to achieving their future goals. So there's a clear trend towards increased collaboration. But there's also a significant gap between the current engagement and future aspirations. Now, let's look more specifically at how foundations partner with different sectors. So currently, foundations partner mostly with communities, and that is community-led or based organizations. But there's also a lot of partnerships with other philanthropy, followed by public and private sectors. Not so much partnering is happening with public development banks or multilateral institutions. And if we look at the graph below, which is about where foundations want to increase partnerships in the future, we see an increase in partnerships with all sectors. What's particularly interesting is that philanthropy already works with other philanthropy. So, foundations partner with other foundations, but they also really want to increase that. And that was expressed by 75% of respondents. Another interesting finding was about the private sector, which is not currently such a common partner for philanthropy. But 64% of respondents said that they want to increase partnerships with private sector. So again, there's a lot of sort of like aspirations. We want to increase partnering in the future. We want to do more. But let's look at the barriers on why this is not happening. So the most significant challenge identified was about insufficient systems mindset and awareness of the need for partnerships. That was identified by 74% of respondents. And that's essentially why we're here. So it starts with awareness raising. The next two key barriers are about funding difficulty in committing resources over longer periods of time, but also about the funding modalities not being optimized for effective partnership development. Another key significant challenge was in demonstrating impact. But interestingly, power imbalances were not seen as a significant barrier by most respondents. So you see that at the bottom. And we found this interesting because foundations are the ones with power, and perhaps that's why they tend not to notice it. But as we start working increasingly more with other key sectors, such as public or private, that might mean giving up some power. So changing, not only the ways you're working, but also the mindset and sort of like how much at the center they are in such partnerships. Now, let's look into institutional capacity to partner. So before I show you findings from the survey, I just wanted to mention that the framing comes from TPI framework called Fit for Partnering. So basically, it's about organizations needing to, in order to maximize benefits of collaboration, they need to be set up and operating optimally to be able to deliver on the rhetoric. So what we found, and I appreciate this is quite a lot of data and quite complicated, but if we look at the top responses where there's the most green, we see the strengths in leadership commitment and board level support. At the same time, if we look sort of more towards the bottom where there's more yellow, orange, or red, and we see areas for improvement that have a lot to do with capacity. So a lack of internal partnering guidance, a lack of staff training in partnerships, and also incentives for staff to partner, such as key performance indicators. And if you look at this graph, you can also see a lot of variation in the data. So even though some foundations have their leadership committed to collaboration, there are others that don't have that at all. So it's really about the internal work that foundations need to do. And each foundation is on a journey that's unique. At the same time, we're here to learn from each other because perhaps some of the foundations are further on the journey than others. And I want to finish with a bit of paradox we saw in our research findings. So as I just said, there's broadly leadership commitment and board level support for partnerships for systems change. At the same time, there's this critical gap where 66% said that they struggle with long-term resource commitments. So basically, there's a disconnect between endorsement and the practical implications. So in reality, funding practices remain misaligned with systems change needs. And that's where more action needs to happen. And that's why today's event is called Turning Rhetoric into Reality. So taking the next step in making it happen. So we'll hear some interesting practical examples from our panelists, but I'm going to stop here and I'll hand it over to Sameera.
Thanks so much, Lena. And we've already had a question come in from Daniela asking us how we define a systems mindset. So before I hand it over to Tom, maybe Lena or Tom, you might want to answer that question. And then Tom, I'll hand it over to you for the reactions piece.
Sure. I can start, perhaps Tom will also fill in. So systems mindset, I think, first of all, is sort of the awareness of what is systems change, what is required, and sort of like addressing the root causes of a problem rather than just symptoms. And because, as I said before, we see foundations that, just do short-term projects, grant making, giving money to small project, but that doesn't address these root causes. I think the mindset is, first of all, in having that awareness that there are different models and there are different ways in how systems operate and what's needed to shift them.
Thank you, Linda. I would fully agree with that. Very, very good, concise definition of something quite complicated. Anyways, now my pleasure to introduce our panel who are going to reflect on these findings and bring it to life with their own experience. So I have three people on the panel. I have Varun Joseph, who's a program manager in the fashion team in Laudes Foundation. And I'm very much hoping that Varun is going to bring a perspective of working in a particular partnership, in a particular context, and using collaboration as a tool to bring about a change in the systems in that context. I'm also delighted to welcome Catalina Herrera, who's the knowledge co-manager at Latimpacto. And Catalina brings experience of working as a regional network of philanthropy. So again, we'll, I hope, bring it all to life, but with a very different lens from an individual foundation and partnership. And finally, Sameera, who you've already met, is going to bring a WINGS perspective, which is obviously that kind of global philanthropy support organization perspective that many of us have in this call. So first of all, I'd like to invite my panel to kind of briefly introduce themselves, and then I shall be firing some questions at them. So yes, Varun, please introduce yourself and say a few words about your work in collaboration and systems change.
Thanks, Tom. I hope everyone can hear me well. Hi, everyone. I'm Varun. I'm a program manager with the Loudest Foundation. I work in the fashion team at the foundation and based in New Delhi. And our programs are global. So for people who don't know much about the foundation, Loudest Foundation is family philanthropy. Its funding comes in from the endowments of the Brennenmeyer family, which is a Dutch German family and owns a lot of businesses, including businesses in fashion, real estate, and some other sectors. So at the foundation, we kind of do work primarily on industrial transformation and focus on a couple of key areas of work in fashion, in the built environment, and also now into trying to understand how the food sector can also transform. And just transition, for example, is a very key component of a lot of our programmatic work. I work in a team, in the fashion team, where a lot of work that we're doing is trying to understand how the fashion sector can transition into a more sustainable one, and a lot of programs that we do over here look at different aspects of these, including new materials, also using existing materials, and trying to see how the fashion sector can move in that sense. But I think something very particular and very unique in some of the programmatic area that we're doing is the work we do in the landscape approach, where again TPI and others have been engaged with us on this initiative. So what we are doing through the landscape approach is we have an initiative called the Regenerative Production Landscape Collaborative. It is looking to look at jurisdictional change across key geographies that we have strategic interests in and want to show demonstration in. And these geographies basically are test grounds to, I think, in many ways, try to showcase the the 4P system as such within a collaborative setup. So we're working with governments, we're working with other philanthropies, working with industry, and working with a lot of implementing partners on ground. So quite some interesting work over there. But yeah, I think a basic introduction to the work that we do, and hopefully Tom asks a couple more questions where I can go into deep diving a little more into how the 4Ps have worked for us as a foundation.
Yes, thank you. We're eager to know more. But first of all, I'd like to invite Catalina to say a few words about Latimpacto and your involvement in this field.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Hello, everyone. I'm Catalina Herrera, co-director of the knowledge area at Latimpacto. We are a network of capital providers dedicated to generating more and better impact in Latin America and the Caribbean. And our work spans the continuum of capital. So we work from venture philanthropy to impact investing, promoting diverse strategies around innovative finance, non-financial support, and impact measurement and management. And we have an interest to show more and share more about catalytic capital, blended finance, sustainable finance to tackle the social and environmental challenges in Latin America and the Caribbean.
Thank you very much. And Sameera, did you want to say anything else at this point about the WINGS work?
I think Benjamin covered that in the introduction, so I'll save time for the discussion. Thanks, Tom.
Okay. Thank you. So my first question to my panel is, what did you find perhaps slightly surprising about the findings from the survey or from the activation report? Perhaps Varun, you'd like to tackle that one.
Sure, Tom. I think something that was quite interesting that, going through the report was you mentioned something about the 79% of the leadership commitment, right? And also, I think about, and then connecting that to the practical implementation, I think that was about 63%. I was just trying to reflect around that, in terms of how do you look at leadership, with the intent and when it comes to the actual action, right? I think one thing that we see in philanthropy is how do you look at long-term commitment? How do you look at ensuring a change can happen, systemically? And usually systemic change takes time. It's not a 5-year strategy that you set, and then in the next 5 years you already kind of exit out of that. So I think one thing was quite interesting in terms of from leadership commitment to actual practical implementation. I think how do you connect those dots more strongly? How do you? And I think that a lot of that is a key part of that. I think the 4Ps work. Philanthropy at the end of the day comes in as a catalyst. It comes in to push that early investment capital into innovative projects, into innovative partnerships. But I think as philanthropy, as leaders in philanthropy, we also have a unique opportunity to use philanthropic capital to bring in collaborations, not with other philanthropies, but I think with the larger stakeholders in the system to, then support long-term change rather than, just focusing on small projects with outcomes and we're trying to move on to the next problem as such. But yeah, I think for systemic change, you need a lot of collaboration. You need constant capital that comes in initially again through philanthropy, but how do you then, bring in these other players to bring in that long-term sustainability of that systemic changes? Sure.
Yeah, thank you. And Catalina, what would you like to highlight as perhaps a slightly surprising or unexpected finding?
I think it's remarkable to see that many philanthropists recognize the importance of adopting a systemic perspective to address complex challenges. So, as the survey show, having this interconnected lens isn't just valuable, it's essential for the future. And at Latimpacto, we actively encourage collaboration among diverse actors, and the data supporting these trends is particularly inspiring for us, especially the increasing partnership between philanthropy and other actors. We know this allowed them to share their experience, knowledge, expertise to find a better solution to the current challenges. So I think for me, the most remarkable finding is this position to work together with other actors.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. Very, very true. Very good insight. Thank you. And Sameera, what about WINGS? Where are you at, in terms of what you expected to find versus what we did find?
I mean, I am going to piggyback off the fact that insufficient systems mindset was a top challenge even beyond funding. And at the same time, we're saying that leadership and boards are committed to cross-sector partnerships. So I think there was a slide where it says, right, that there is a disconnect or a gap between intent and implementation. So I think how do we move beyond symbolic commitment to the idea of partnerships and systems change to really embed a shared understanding of what this needs to look like across the organizational DNA and across all levels. So for me, it's really bringing up what is the organizational change that we need to be focusing on in order to convert this from idea to reality. And I think there's a big opportunity right there. And so some gaps and opportunities that came up, and I'm going to just very quickly touch on 3. So with this mismatch between intent and implementation, there's this lack of shared vision and understanding of the importance of what we mean by systems change and partnerships. horizontally and vertically across teams and levels within an organization. And coupled with that, there was inadequate capacity that was mentioned, training, tools, but also time to invest in developing and strengthening partnerships. So given that there is leadership commitment, I think that can be leveraged as a catalyst to look at how we institutionalize this kind of thinking and action, make a case for investment and building capacity across the organization, and make sure that we're dedicating time as roles are being built so people have time to spend on relationship building and engage in partnership spaces. And it was interesting to see that there's a growing appetite to partner across sectors. And I know that in conversations that we've been, even like with public development banks, which featured lower, there is appetite for them to engage with philanthropy, but there are barriers. And I know that this will be shared in the report that's going to be coming out soon. But even in a recent regional policy dialogue that we held in the Latin American Caribbean region with Latimpacto and partnering with TPI, barriers such as language, motivations, priorities, egos and power, structural differences in how sectors are organized all came up. And so I think the opportunity there is that we need to invest in spaces for dialogue and knowledge sharing across sectors to build awareness of what the other is facing in terms of challenges, in strengths and perspectives. And this requires investment. So that's continuity of action, but also the fact that this is a forum where we can build trust, because that also comes up as a challenge. And lastly, I think what was surprising for me is that there were 6 roles that have been highlighted for philanthropy, and it's great. But in order for philanthropy to really embrace and deliver on those roles, we need the right conditions and enabling environment. And I was surprised to see that featured lower as a barrier. I would have expected that to be higher. So that was a bit surprising for me.
Thank you. And I think along the way, you've given us some nice examples of how the results that we've presented in terms of data are actually playing out in the conversations, meetings, and webinars of members of WINGS. So that's fantastic. So I'd like to kind of also draw similar experiences from my other 2 panelists, so that we can see what really resonates in your work in terms of these findings, and yes, bring it to life, please, or bring some of it to life with some examples. So perhaps Varun, I'll go back to you and ask you that question. What's it actually like managing a partnership and having these barriers every day to address?
Sure. I think Storm was here a couple of months back in a project area that we work in. Again, like I think I mentioned in the beginning, the Region Reproduction Landscape Collaborative. One such collaborative is in the state of Madhya Pradesh in India, where it is our oldest RPLC, what we call as RPLC. And here again, I think this case, again, within the work that we do as Lauros Foundation, is quite interesting to, see where how partnerships work, how partnerships act as catalysts for long-term change. And we've also witnessed, I think, a lot of challenges, opportunities, and I think all of that comes through this whole process of systemic change. And I think one thing, just talking a little more about the RPLC, for example, so what we are trying to do is see how an entire jurisdiction, moves to a more regenerative production system. So the geography that we are focusing on, we work with farmers on the ground. We work with farmers who practice different types of farming today, but the larger motivation of the collaborative is to see how they can be sustainable, how sourcing from these farmers can also be sustainable, so that businesses become more responsible in terms of what they're going to be picking up from farmers, whether it's on fiber, whether it's on food, or whether any other crop for that matter. But in a country like in India, for example, the bottom of the pyramid is usually the farmer, where a lot of the resources, a lot of finance, a lot of motivations for them to continue work isn't there. And how do you bring in that? So the role of government is very important. So through the collaborative, for example, in this system, we have a convening organization who brings in all of these various stakeholders, the government, the implementing partners on the ground, but also the voices from the farmers, but then also bring in the correction from the top to bottom in terms of bringing in the brands, bringing in the understanding for investors to come and understand how money can flow into these landscapes and make them sustainable. And investors include both public and private financing in that sense. So I think the RPLC is a great example, I think, in terms of the work we do at Louders Foundation in terms of early stage systemic change, and we have kind of in a way set up the foundations for it. As philanthropy, we have come in with the capital to initiate the collaborative and put in the catalyst to bring in these stakeholders together, tie them together, and push them forward. But I think we are also starting to see early signs of these other stakeholders who are going to take it to being sustainable come in and already start playing a role. So you're starting to see the governments coming and putting in money. You're starting to see investors, businesses who are going to be sourcing from that, very keen on continuing to invest into these landscapes, for example. So yeah, I think the RPLC is one such example. I have one other example. If I have time, I could just share that.
Yeah, I think just let's move on, Varun, for a moment. We'll come back to you. But before we do, very briefly, there's a number of sort of points and questions around systems mindset that other people within the call are putting onto the chat. And I'd like to kind of introduce those voices, now, if I may. So just a thought, Varun, in terms of, the work you're describing, do all the different stakeholders within RPLC need to have a systems mindset? And if so, is the fact that there is a sort of shared goal in terms of a high level, target or objective for the partnership, does that help bring that systems mindset if it's needed?
Tom, I think definitely it's needed, and I think this is part of, I think, maybe the bit in terms of the challenges that I might have kind of missed out on in the bit where I described the RPLC. A lot of work that has been done in the geographies that we've worked in have been very project focused in the past. So it's always been we are addressing some problem and it's never been to move the system as such. So I think in terms of also engagement with these stakeholders, giving them the capacity to understand systemic thinking, I think that was also a massive challenge in terms of that's why systemic change takes time. Even to set the foundations, it takes a good 3-4 years for all the partners in the system to have understanding of even being able to then set those targets, like you mentioned, right? So for us, I think now the RPLC in India has been going on for 3 years. We have come to a stage only after 3 years where that there's a common understanding, a shared goal for the entire landscape on how we're going to look at it in 5 years, in 10 years. So it takes time. It takes, again, I think that's where Sameera mentioned, I think also in terms of how philanthropic capital comes in and provides capacity building, provides organizational development support, for example, to organizations to build these capacities. I think that's quite interesting to see how all of this, fits. And I think for us, it's been a learning throughout. I think when you were here in Tom, it's always, we have the tendency of following a 5-year strategy cycle. And, there is one topic that we pick up today, and then the next we have to already move on to something maybe completely different. So how do you continue, latching those different connection points as such will be interesting, and something I think we're learning also in the process, I guess.
Yeah, thank you. Catalina, what resonates with your work? Very different perspective, I think, from the one that Baron is bringing, particularly through his work within RPLC. So, yes, for a regional network, what did you kind of find resonated with your work and the results, and what examples can you share with us?
From every year, we conduct a survey on the impact ecosystem in Latin America and the Caribbean. And for the past 2 years, we have identified a lack of collaboration as one of the primary barriers to generating impact. Yet, there's an encouraging shift. More actors are exploring innovative methods for better results and new ways to have partners to do a better impact. So a standout example is Fundación Arturo Cesana in Colombia. They are working to redefine how society views the elderly, moving away from a paradigm of dependency to one where they are seen as active contributors to the economy and society. And they using system mapping and engaging diverse stakeholders. Fundación Cesana shifted its focus from direct service delivery to driving systemic change in how longevity is perceived. And I think this approach is a powerful illustration of how when you change your focus and you don't think the challenges and the problems as something that you need to solve, and you understand that you could interconnect with other organizations, with other sectors, you find more answers. And you don't only try to find an answer to a specific challenge. It's more like change. For example, in this case, they are working to change the perspective about a group of people. And that gives us, as humanity, the opportunity to change from the idea we have a problem to we have a challenge and an opportunity, and we have to know what is our role to solve that problem. So I think that's the magic of systemic change. It's not only think a problem, it think the roots and all the relation between that problem and others, and it recognize the knowledge and the expertise of different sectors and put together to find a better answer.
And we're getting some questions and points around the role of financial actors in system change, which I think you're well placed to help us with, Catalina. So I think one question is around the fact that they are, obviously ecosystem shapers, but do they appreciate that, and are they willing to kind of support that kind of systemic change as well as their other roles in providing finance on a more project basis? And I think there's something around how to evolve kind of funding characteristics in a way which kind of helps to support system change. So are these things which you can talk to for us?
I think here in Latin America, we are interested in work with this strategy of blended finance. This is the opportunity to have different actors and different sectors with different aspirations of return and possibility to assume risk. But you put these different characteristics together, and you could give to the private sector or financial sector an opportunity to participate in generate impact in social and environmental issues. So, for example, if philanthropy assuming first loss position or offering concessional terms, can make high potential projects more attractive to investors. And this approach is essential for unlocking funding for initiatives with uncertain returns, such as early stage renewable energies, technologies, or social enterprises in underserved markets. So I think we have a challenge because these different sectors don't have the experience of work together, but we have an opportunity because they are trying, they want. And we have or we are looking to different cases where DFIs have an important role working with philanthropy to attract this financial ecosystem or this private sector to this conversation.
Thank you. And Sameera, I think there's a question which kind of links together the topics that Catalina's just been speaking around, and also this big theme that came through in terms of the length of time that that philanthropists and others are prepared to support not being enough, because changing a system just takes much longer than our normal timeframes. So, yeah, how do we help philanthropists to kind of think this through and come up with better solutions in terms of their sort of timescales?
Thanks, Tom. And maybe I'll follow on from Catalina. The role of other financiers, understanding their role. I mean, we have just come out of a year-long process, with the G20. For the first time, we had Philanthropy for Sustainable Development Working Group as part of that, which brought together civil society and philanthropy actors from across the globe. And within the G20 framework, there's been a lot of focus around reforming the global financial architecture and what that means. And therefore, what are the innovative financing mechanisms that we need to be looking at? And blended finance, for instance, comes up quite often, and I see it as a tool within the toolbox of tools we can use. I think what was really useful in terms of having this cross collaborative platform was to really look at the nuance. As these mechanisms are being created, how do we make sure that people and communities are placed at the center? So it's not just a simple de-risking mechanism, but it is a de-risking mechanism that is still focused on the end impact that we want to create, the social impact that we want to create. Otherwise, it could simply be a mechanism for unlocking or for de-risking private investment. So these were the kinds of conversations that were had, which I thought were really, really valuable. And I think in terms of getting others on board, we all need to have a systems mindset. And I think for us, when we think about, I think there was a question also around what is the vision? I think it was going to, and I think we need to frame our vision, and at least at WINGS we do, in the challenging context of our time. We're facing a number of growing issues and challenges across the world: war, conflict, climate crisis, unchecked technological developments, and much, much more. And if you look at this, they're all linked to structural issues, the way systems have been set up. And if we're saying that we need a systems approach, we also need to look at the way systems are currently set up, and they're not fit for purpose, which means we are part of the system, will need to shift. And so when we think about this, for us, how it translates into the philanthropic world is working with our members in the broader field. We looked at what does transformation mean for the philanthropic sector. And this is where I think shifting mindsets and coming back to that point can be really, really powerful. And so we advocate for 3 mindset shifts that really came up from all of this collaborative research and discussions. And the first is really around giving up control and giving up power and being at the service of others, other actors, partners, communities, movements, private sector, and governments, which basically means really playing an enabler role in collaborations, but also asking organizations to take a longer term perspective. Darian and I have talked about this before, like what is considered long term by philanthropy, 3 to 5 years, is not the same for governments who are thinking much, much longer. How do we challenge that? And I think one of the things we've heard through our time on working on this is, yes, tools, resources, research is very important, but also how do we shine the light on examples of how organizations are shifting? what are the challenges that they're encountering, and how do we use that to inspire action and then start to really accelerate this, because the challenges are not waiting. The second is really about walking the talk, and this links into philanthropy using all of its assets, not just grant making, but influence, networks, operations, board leadership, organizational culture, and tying it behind values to make sure that we are, using all of this to move in the right direction. And lastly, and I think it comes to the question around systems approach versus systems mindset, is taking a long-term holistic approach of the challenges that we're facing. We can no longer just have a siloed individual organizational approach. How does our work connect into the broader context of what is happening? How are we influencing it, and how is it influencing us? It can be overwhelming, but I think that is where networks and partnerships that can help translate become really, really helpful. So I think that's the direction in terms of transformation that we're working towards. And I think it's a great opportunity to invite others to share their experiences, because one thing we're learning is there's a lot happening in pockets. How do we shine the light and learn from it as well?
Thank you, Sameera. And I know you'll want to hand over to our final speakers very shortly, since we're very sadly running short of time. But before then, I want to just have one sentence from my other two panelists. If that's possible, Farron, to give your sort of vision for the future of systems change and collaboration in one sentence, please fire away.
Sure, Tom. I think maybe I give two words as such. My words would be implementation of patient capital as patient capital, using that, focusing on the patient bit. And also, I think this whole bit in terms of shifting from reactive, capital catalyst of financing to more systemic, financing assets. So, yeah.
Thank you. Very to the point, but very very thoughtful. Thank you. And Catalina?
In one sentence, I think collaboration and assume risk.
Even better. Thank you so much. So thank you to all my panel. And I will now hand back to you, Sameera, with your other hat on to take us to the final session.
Great. I'm going to say a big thanks to everyone who's been sharing not just questions, but comments as well in the chat. Thank you so much. The team is going to try and respond to them, but please do reach out to us, because there's a lot of meaty stuff that's been covered here. I will bring in Darian to share some thoughts and also some next steps at this point.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's been such a rich discussion, and I think it's just continually reiterating the absolute need for these collaborations to be able to solve some of the biggest challenges. But they won't just happen. That we actually need a concerted, targeted effort to really build the capabilities, the institutional capabilities, build the ecosystems, support the development of the foundations to be able to work this way. Collectively, part of the philanthropy support organizations need to add this as a string to their bow to be able to really support foundations to be able to do this better. As part of that, we are looking at the next phase of our sort of philanthropy support program, which has taken in a lot of, all of this sort of needs analysis and the whole load of different conversations that we've had with so many different philanthropy organizations. I just wanted to just very briefly just sort of share what the current thinking is, and really invite people to continue to input into the design of this transform program. And this transform meaning both to transform philanthropy to deliver more transformational impact. And the current thinking looks a bit like this, that there's sort of two parts to it. One is around how do we actually build the institutional capability of philanthropy to be able to really sort of drive this type of multi-stakeholder transformation. So we're looking at really sort of getting the in-depth research and evidence that we know that isn't necessarily there yet, to develop really inspirational case studies and actually create that best practice. which can then be disseminated with webinars, with a masterclass series, with sort of communities of practice, both for foundations and philanthropy support organizations. And then we'll put this all together into some sort of resource hub with practical tools and guidance to really to give the tools to philanthropy to work this way. At the same time as doing this sort of wider sector-wide program, we're looking about sort of providing the direct support both to foundations and to the system transformational partnerships. So to foundations themselves, everything from developing the transformational partnership strategies to the internal systems and processes to the funding modalities to trying to ensure that the board not only is on board, but also is willing to invest in the organization to allow it to work this way. Then also the support to partnerships, the development of quality assurance for collaboration, health checks, et cetera, et cetera. The idea is by directly supporting these organizations, that will then feed into the sector-wide capacity building. We'll learn so much from it and trying to work with as many partnership support organizations around the world as possible, trying to provide this direct support to then, as I said, draw out the learning, feed into the sector-wide capacity building program. So that's sort of where we are with this thinking, and of course we are very delighted to with our partnering with WINGS to really sort of push and promote this approach. I think the combination of WINGS is incredible network connections, experience, alongside sort of TPIs, partnership technologies that we've developed over 20 years. I think is a very powerful set of capabilities to bring together. So with that, I'll hand over to Benjamin, I guess, perhaps for the final word.
Well, I'm here, but I think we can hear a couple of words from Sameera, who's also I think willing to share some sort of final thoughts, and I'll be happy to add anything.
Sure. Thanks, Benjamin, and thanks, Darian. It has indeed been a great partnership with TPI, and it's been great that, as if you look at the streams that we're talking about, growing the knowledge, resources, and stories, it's been great to have this needs assessment, and it's been great to partner with TPI and allowed us. And of course, there have been other regional actors such as Herrera and Latimpacto and APP and others who've contributed to this. We have a few pieces of research coming up. So of course, there is the report that will consolidate all these insights and more that will come out in the next few weeks. And then we also have research on multi-stakeholder partnerships that Benjamin mentioned that we're doing with our members that will, again, add to the resource base. And we highly, highly request that there's so much work that participants are doing on this call. Please do share it with us, because we'd love to capture the knowledge that's already been created and really make it available to others and give it more visibility. And I think based on what we are hearing and seeing and what is already out there, the need for capacity building is very clear. So really thinking through what that could look like for the philanthropy landscape is something that we're really excited to be working on moving forward. And I think from mindset shifts to capacity building for action to how do we really mainstream this kind of thinking is really front of mind for us. So bringing people together in person, online, across sectors to get to know each other, to discuss this, to set the foundations for trust, I think is going to be really important moving forward. So thank you so much. There's been a lot of behind the scenes work. I'd like to give a shout out to Liana, Natalia, Bia, Lena, Tom, Darren, the team at TPI and WINGS that has really helped put this together, and of course others who really contributed their time, Latimpacto, and so Varun and Catalina as well for their time today, and for everyone else who's joining us here. Thank you so much. Benjamin, anything I might have missed, and of course a last closing word to you.
Thanks so much. Yes, no, I don't think you missed much, but I just wanted to thank everybody for an insightful discussion. I just leave this event with the sentiment that everything is in place for what we've been talking about to really become a reality at scale and the norm in the philanthropic sector rather than the innovation or the cutting edge of our field. We have the knowledge, we have the practices, the networks are in place, we have expert organizations like TPI and others. So like now we just want to orchestrate all of that. We need to coordinate all of that. We need to support each other in making this the norm and the way philanthropy works and thinks about its role in bringing about systemic change. I also want to say that oftentimes because we're nerds, we talk technically, etc., and so it can seem a bit like overwhelming for like the average foundation, let's say. And I think it's also really important for all of us to demystify these multi-stakeholder partnerships, because of course some of them are extremely sophisticated, complex financial schemes of blended finance and so on. But then even for a small local foundation, and most foundations work locally at community level, there is a way that they can engage in partnership with local authorities, with local businesses, and play this role, with sticking to their mission and to their role. We don't ask a foundation, or we don't encourage foundation to just drop what they're doing and do something else, but just in a cross-cutting way, in a values led way, change their just the how, and it's possible for everyone, including for small and medium foundations. So I think we need to work all together to make that accessible, to make that easy to understand, and to, again, as we said several times today, provide the tools, the spaces, the coordination mechanisms, and the platforms that are needed, because it won't happen door to door, like one organization to another. We need really to create an ecosystem that will accelerate all of that. So thank you so much. Thanks for your participation, all the great questions on the chat, and we look forward to continuing to engaging with all of you in this pretty important journey towards collaboration for transformation. Thank you so much.
One last bit, I do want to say a special thanks also to Max, who's here and who actually helped bring TPI and WINGS together in this format. So thank you, Max, and thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you, Sameera. Bye.
Thanks so much, everyone. Bye.
Everyone.